Dr. Vanessa King was on top of the world, an accomplished neurosurgeon and an inspiration to many. She had just finished delivering a keynote address at a prestigious medical conference in Atlanta. Her speech had left the audience in awe, detailing her groundbreaking work in neurosurgery and the barriers she had broken in a male-dominated field. The applause was still echoing in her ears as she made her way to the parking garage, dressed in a sleek black suit that matched her poised and professional demeanor. Despite the long day, Vanessa felt energized by the night's success. She was eager to get home to her family, to her husband Marcus and daughter Lila, and unwind after such a fulfilling experience. As Vanessa approached her car, a sleek black sedan, she noticed a group of young men hanging around nearby. They were laughing and talking loudly, their voices bouncing off the cold concrete walls of the nearly deserted parking garage. Instinctively, Vanessa hesitated for a moment. Her intuition told her to be cautious, but she brushed the thought aside. She had faced greater challenges in her life, after all. These were just teenagers, and she had nothing to fear. She unlocked her car and slid into the driver's seat, her mind already drifting to thoughts of home. But as she started the engine, the sound of footsteps approaching her window snapped her back to the present. One of the young men stood beside her car, tapping politely on the window. Before the young man could say anything, the situation took a dramatic and dangerous turn. Out of nowhere, two police cruisers sped into the garage, lights flashing but sirens eerily silent. Officers leaped from their cars, guns drawn, shouting commands at both Vanessa and the young men. The sudden chaos was overwhelming. Vanessa's heart pounded in her chest as she raised her hands, completely blindsided by the aggressive arrival of the police. "Step out of the vehicle now!" An officer barked at Vanessa, his gun trained on her. She tried to comply, opening the car door slowly, but before she could fully step out, an officer grabbed her arm roughly, yanking her out with excessive force. The violent movement caused her to stumble, nearly falling to the ground. Pain shot through her arm as the officer twisted it behind her back and forced her against the hot hood of her car. She could feel the searing heat from the engine through her clothes, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the fear and disbelief flooding her mind. "I'm complying! Please! There's no need for this!" Vanessa tried to keep her voice calm, but the officer wasn't listening. He pushed her down harder, his knee pressing into her back. The situation was spiraling out of control and Vanessa couldn't understand why. As Vanessa lay pinned against her car, one of the officers leaned in close, sneering into her ear. "Think you're special because you drive a nice car, wear a fancy suit? We know your type. You think you're above the law? Well, not tonight." The words hit Vanessa like a physical blow. This wasn't just an overreaction by the police. This was targeted racism. They weren't seeing her as Dr. Vanessa King, a respected neurosurgeon, but as a threat simply because of the color of her skin. She realized with a sinking heart that these officers were punishing her for existing in a space where they believed she didn't belong. The officers ignored her attempts to explain that she had just left a medical conference and had no connection to the young men they had also apprehended. They were more interested in asserting their authority than listening to reason. One officer roughly frisked her, his aggressive search leaving her feeling violated. He asked if she had any weapons, to which she sharply responded, "No, I don't. I just spoke at the conference in the building behind us." The officer was unimpressed. Without offering any explanation, they shoved her toward the waiting cruiser. "We're taking you in for questioning," one officer growled, his grip on her arm painful. Despite her protests, Vanessa was forced into the back of the police car, her mind spinning. How could this be happening to her? At the station, the situation worsened. Vanessa was thrown into a small, grimy holding cell, her wrists aching from the too tight handcuffs that had only just been removed. Hours passed with no explanation, no phone call, no answers. When two officers finally swaggered into her cell, their expressions were twisted with smug satisfaction. "You think you're too good for a little questioning?" One officer sneered, his tone mocking. "I've done nothing wrong," Vanessa said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. The other officer laughed cruelly. "You seriously believe we care? Out here, you're just another one of them." The baton in his hand snapped open with a metallic click, and before Vanessa could react, they began to beat her. The blows landed on her ribs, her sides, her back. Pain exploded in her body with each strike. But what hurt more was the realization that they didn't see her as a human being. They saw her as an object to break. Hours later, Officer Jenkins, a tall, middle-aged man, appeared outside her cell. He held her ID in his hand, his brow furrowed as he read the information. "Dr. Vanessa Roberts," he muttered, his voice thick with irritation. He had just realized they had brutalized not just any woman, but a respected neurosurgeon. The weight of the mistake was clear, but instead of apologizing, Jenkins's face hardened. He knew they had to release her, but his pride wouldn't allow him to admit fault. "Get up," he commanded, jerking her to her feet. Vanessa winced as her injuries flared with fresh pain, but she refused to let them see her break. Jenkins handed her back her ID with a dismissive, "Here, don't lose this," and coldly told her she was free to go, as though the whole ordeal was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. When Vanessa finally returned home, her body and spirit were battered. She recounted the horrific night to Marcus and Lila, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and disbelief. Marcus listened, his fists clenching in anger. "This can't go unchallenged," he said, his voice low but vibrating with suppressed rage. "We're going to make sure those officers are held accountable." Vanessa nodded, her determination hardening. "We have to. This isn't just about me. It's about standing up to the systemic racism that allows this kind of brutality to happen." The next morning, Marcus reached out to their contacts in the media, and soon Vanessa's story was making headlines. She spoke out passionately about the violence and racism she had endured, calling for meaningful reforms in law enforcement. Civil rights groups rallied behind her, organizing protests and demanding justice, not just for Vanessa, but for all the others who had suffered similar indignities. Vanessa became a beacon for the fight against racial injustice. Her courage and determination inspired others to speak out. With the support of civil rights organizations and advocacy groups, she pushed for systemic changes in policing. The police department was forced to announce an internal investigation, and Vanessa, alongside Marcus, continued to fight for accountability. One evening, as the family sat together, Lila looked up at her mother with admiration. "Mom, you're so strong. I can't believe how brave you are." Marcus raised his glass, his eyes filled with pride and resolve. "To Vanessa and to the fight for justice. We won't stop until we see real change." Vanessa's story was no longer just about one night of brutality. It had become a rallying cry for change. Her strength and perseverance in the face of injustice became a reminder that even when the system tries to break you, your spirit can ignite a movement.